So we're going to have a quick panel discussion about how we've been supporting R&D and wellbeing innovation and its role. And the interesting thing about our panelists, who are all popping up along the screen, is that we worked out they sort of represent a journey from beginning to the end of this process. The end probably being Aejaz and access into the NHS, and the beginning being Ben at research level, with the others jumbled up in the middle. So we're going to throw out the question, really, what role does R&D have in supporting innovation and well-being, and then particularly what role do you have in your organization, just to try and plot the journey quite a lot of our startups have been going on. So I think if you introduce yourselves as we go, that might be actually more interesting. So if we start with Ben, and then we can fight over who feels they go next. But Ben, do you want to just sort of talk about, well, introduce yourself, and then
absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Toby. Yeah. So I know we've only got a short period of time for this, so I'll probably talk at 100 miles an hour, but just contact me on chat if you need more information. So I'm a medical engineer by background, specialising in biomechanics and instrumentation, so medical electronics. And I've been at Sheffield Hallam as part of the sports engineering group since 2006. And I would slightly disagree with Toby about the roles we can play within the Wellbeing Accelerator. Absolutely, we can be involved at a very early stage with basic research and knowledge exchange, but also kind of halfway through products when you're looking to move towards more production or clinically ready tools, and we can look at electronics, mechanical, software design and co-design, but also late stage validation and clinical testing. Using the amazing facilities of the AWRC, which are probably not available, I would imagine, to any of the startups within the accelerator. And I think we've covered that full range with a lot of the projects I've been supporting. I've personally been supporting 6 companies. I won't particularly go into the details, but perhaps one of the interesting things is, because almost all of that work has involved face-to-face work, and clearly we've been severely impacted by COVID. And a lot of that face-to-face work has been with participants who would have been considered vulnerable through age or other illness. So we've had to do some, I think pivoting was the term that was used earlier. We've done some very, very creative pivoting. And just very quickly, I'll describe a project that we're starting next week with Exio, which is they're producing gamification to improve balance for older people with loss of balance. And we're designing games, and we're designing some of the electronics to pick up their balance and use that to control games. Now, bringing older people on site is clearly not going to be possible at the moment during lockdown. Getting people to do it in their own homes who have balance limitations is also not safe. So what we've done is we've designed iPad games that are controlled through tilting rather than balance, and it's controlled through hands rather than through legs. But it's an intuitive and quite closely paralleled interface. And through that, we can assess the user interface with a group of users that aren't particularly IT literate, and also look at the motivational aspects of the games, whether they find them too fast, too slow, boring, motivating. And so we're looking forward to kind of a week of very intense co-design work with these participants over the next week, without any face-to-face contact whatsoever. So these things are possible. We can collect some really interesting research evidence. It just takes a bit of creativity. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. And then Jason, maybe if I could bring you in as a sort of part of Ben Heller's package. The AWRC has been central to this program, and the aim has really been, as Ben said, to get the startups quick access to both kit and people that they would not otherwise have access to or would have trouble finding. But obviously the AWRC is very new as well and has been shut for most of the last year. Yeah. But moving forward, I mean, that interaction between early stage companies and perhaps larger industrial partners, how do you see that developing within the AWRC?
Well, I'm going to do that typical thing that panelists do where they kind of go off on their own channel. So it's interesting to be described as part of Ben's package. Good to see you, Ben, by the way. And good to see so many people on the line as well. There's a great audience of folk out there, and everybody's so interesting, giving great support. The thing I want to sort of say before I start really is this whole idea. We talk a lot about sort of the elderly population, but when I first started in this role, I had quite a long conversation with Tony Schwartz, the dean of our college. And one of the things Tony said to me is, don't forget the youth, don't forget the young as well as the old. And the question that I'd like to ask not just the panel, but everybody else around us here, is, what kind of world do we want to leave for our children? And I don't want to sound too grandiose by saying that, because actually R&D in health and wellbeing is critical to making this happen. The AWRC is shaped around looking at prevention and resilience in populations rather than simply intervention when things go wrong. So we make people stronger. So things like COVID happen, and the AWRC and all the innovators that are involved in the AWRC and the researchers, they're about making people more resilient, a more resilient lot. So when these things happen, we can contend with them better. But as well as all that, what does it all mean? Why are we doing this? Well, actually, think about things like health inequalities. That building behind me is in the middle of Darnall. It's a really poor ward in Sheffield. And actually, why shouldn't people in Darnall or Shire Green or Shirecliff, disadvantaged areas around our city, why shouldn't those people have long, healthy lives? Why shouldn't those people have, lives just as long as anybody else? And I think this whole idea of addressing that by using technology is really important. I've spent 21 years working with companies of all sizes, SMEs, right through to global corporate businesses at Medilink in my previous employer. And this idea of thinking differently how we can use current technology, but also by embracing the community, having the patient, the person at the heart of what we do, working alongside them to make sure they aren't having health done to them, they're actually doing it to themselves and working alongside us. So I think that whole thing about also working with business to make that happen. I see business not just as exploiters, but as almost like applied facilitators of technology to improve people's health. And this whole idea of the health and wellbeing agenda is hugely important. Sheffield Hallam University is an applied university. We take research and we apply it to the real world. And I think that's hugely important. And if you think about why that's important, coming back better from COVID and things like that, something like 50 or 70 billion pounds per year cost this country on health inequalities. We can even start to address that, will make a huge difference. But the money's one thing. What really matters is all of us, our lives, how we progress forward. And I think this idea of creating a continuum in innovation, in R&D, and that's what I'm here for. I'm the Deputy Director of the AWRC with a lead responsibility for R&D for business. I think this idea of looking at this whole continuum of how a business is formed, pre-startup, SME business, spin-out organizations, working with medium-sized organizations and large businesses. And I believe the AWRC and Hallam as a university should be able to work anywhere on that continuum. I think that's so important to the future of, our healthcare, really. I'll stop now. That was quite a long time.
Well, thanks. And Lindsey, Phillipa and Aejaz, you're all mentors on the program, so you've had a lot of chance to talk to the startups. And also you all have your own little bit of what you do. Phillipa, do you want to just give us some of the ideas, the interactions you've had, and your perception of how the R&D is important and been supported?
Yeah, so I'm with
yourself and say who you do, what you do.
Yeah, I'm with Devices for Dignity. So we're an organisation hosted by Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, been around since 2008, actually, in various forms. And this is about catalysing new technology, thinking about long-term conditions. And of course, that goes into what we can do at the front end in terms of our own health and wellbeing to hopefully not develop certain conditions as we progress, but also supporting people already living with chronic conditions. And I think really what's been interesting talking to a lot of the startups and understanding where they've come from, I think is about behaviour and how we don't all think the same in terms of our health and wellbeing. We don't have the same motivations, aims, expectations. So I think there was a lot in terms of how R&D has a role in thinking about the kind of design, behavioural, social components in terms of adoption of using wellbeing technology, and how that research has to be fundamental to understand how somebody else is going to use something. We can't come in with that N equals 1. Well, this is how I'd use this bit of technology or this product or service. It has to understand how you segment that market and how people are going to use something in terms of in the future, that being an ongoing piece of innovation that is used in people's well-being. So I think a lot of the work we do is thinking about that human factors element, thinking about behaviour, working with user groups from the very front end, and thinking about how user-centred design is built into that whole process, so that you're saving yourself sort of cost and time later on when you've invented something which works for a certain population, but not for as many as you'd hoped it would to have that impact. And I think the D4D methodology, which back in 2008 was probably ahead of its time, but clearly people are embracing very, very fully in terms of starting with the unmet need, really understanding. So, you know, when Jen was talking earlier about, you know, there's something missing here. People need that rehab. They need it to be accessible. They need it to be easy to use. They need to be able to do it without a physio having to stand over them to sort of free up that capacity, really getting under the skin of that and understanding where that need lies, and then working with those users to influence the usability and thinking about that. So I think I can see a lot in terms of the inquiries I've had in the past through Device for Dignity and where the startups have come in. And I think it's interesting to see how that support has been there to help people think about not only, you know, people, it's not about the product, is it? People don't want the product for the product. They want it to be able to achieve something. What will this enable me to do? So I don't want to be an Olympic athlete. I want to be able to run and get a bit fitter and feel better about myself. So I want to go on holiday or see my grandchildren. So it's about the purpose of it. And I think that's been interesting with the startups as to where they see what will my innovation help someone to achieve.
I think you described nicely the wider R&D aspect of the accelerator. Is there's talking to the engineers, building and testing the thing, the user-centered design input, getting people to think about how people use it, who uses it, is really where the mentoring comes in around the AWRC expertise. And Lindsey, both you and Medipex generally have been really, really involved. So you just give us a bit on both, please, and it'd be also interesting to hear your take on it.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey from an organisation called Medipex, and we support innovators from whether it's from the NHS, universities or SMEs to develop new products and services that can improve patient health and well-being. We help take people from the point where they've got an idea through to where they've kind of developed and tested their idea and hopefully demonstrated that it works. So I think for me, the importance of R&D in health and well-being is around that, making sure that the relatively limited budget that's available to invest in health and well-being innovation is appropriately used. So you've got sort of research on the earlier stages to actually help identify what are the real problems and where are there opportunities for improvement, and where is the real need for improvement that can deliver the best benefit for patients, but also efficiency in the health delivery service. And then later on, R&D is valuably important on the part of the pathway that we work along, because you've got to generate the evidence that your idea actually does what you've said it was going to do from the outset. So from a regulator's point of view, is it safe and does it work? But also from it's never going to deliver any benefit unless people actually buy it and adopt it and use it. So as well as the evidence, using research to generate evidence for regulatory approval to make sure it's safe and it works, you also, as Pippa was saying, you've got to incorporate that usability element of it to make sure you're developing something that people can use, and they actually want it, they can afford it, and they can see how it will fit into either existing pathways. So our sort of work that we've done predominantly with the startups on the accelerator has been having those conversations around involving users, thinking about the end users in terms of who's buying it, who's using it, what are their drivers, and making sure that you conduct R&D activities to develop the evidence that both of those people need to see. And that's the best way that you're going to get this intervention adopted. Does it actually work? Does it deliver the benefits that you originally set out for it to deliver?
And you guys have been doing a lot of mentoring, I think more than just you from the team, isn't that right?
There's been quite a few of us from the team. Yes, there's a couple of colleagues on the call today.
And have you had any further engagements with some of the startups?
We've had quite a number of one-to-one follow-ups after the sort of speed mentoring sessions. A number of people have asked to get in touch, or conversely, we've asked to get in touch where we've seen opportunities for us to help people. So yeah, we've had a number of one-to-one conversations. That's and potentially we can work further with some of those organisations going forward as well.
In the networking, I was asked by someone what happens after an accelerator. And I think what you're describing there is the idea of an accelerator being a catalyst to get everyone together very quickly. But when it ends, the network still exists, the contacts are still there, and they can continue to do things. Which brings me very neatly to Aejaz. With all your different titles, even you've managed to squeeze them all on your signature, but I mean, the AHSN in particular really being another network next to our network. So please introduce yourself and what you both of your outfits do.
Sure. So thanks, Toby. I'm So I've got, I guess you could think of it as two hats. I'm part of the Academic Health Science Network of Yorkshire and Humber, but I'm fully embedded within the South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw's integrated care system. And you've probably all heard that the ICSs are essentially a model of, that's becoming more and more formal in planning and strategizing about service development across the health and social care sector. So the South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw ICS covers 5 areas: Sheffield, Rotherham, Doncaster, Barnsley and Bassetlaw. And so all of the health and care providers and the local authorities and a number of voluntary sector organizations are part of the ICS. And what we're doing in the Innovation Hub in the ICS is trying to, I guess you could think of it as priming the system and all of these various entities across the system to be more ready for adoption of innovation, so that their innovation can be adopted quicker, better across the health and care geography. So research has a really strong part to play in that, but for the most part, in the ICS, we're very closely integrated with the commissioning bodies, the CCGs of all of these 5 entities, and those are essentially, from a commercial perspective, customers of the SMEs and startups that we have across the table. And so the end goal for us is to ensure that our commissioners that we work with on a day-to-day basis have the key decision points that they need. So the outcomes of all of the research activities or evaluation activities that happen, the end goal with each of those is key decision points that the commissioners can decide investment decisions, make investment decisions on in adopting, those innovations in their patches. So we get involved. So although you started off, Toby, with saying that we're probably at the end of a pipeline of innovation, but I think my AHSN hat, where we're all about adoption of mature evidence-based innovations and technologies in the health sector, definitely I would say we're at the end of the pipeline. But at the same time, being entrenched in the ICS, we constantly come across a lot of unmet needs and challenges. Some of those will have possibly market-ready solutions already out there that we can match them with. But for a lot of them, solutions don't currently exist. And there may be innovators, in these accelerator programs that may have solutions or half-ready solutions that could quickly pivot to support an unmet need that we have identified in our patch. So already one of the innovators in this accelerator, Kevin Orton, who's developed solution around asthma originally, are now pivoting towards cardiac rehabilitation, and that's an unmet need that we definitely have in our patch here. So we could then support them to kind of understand those new needs for which they already have a solution potentially. But
I think what you're describing nicely is, there are lots of words associated with innovation like melting pots and the social network element of it. What we're looking here on the screen here, really, with the 6 of us, is we're bringing together lots of branches out to other networks, and information is flowing in both directions. I think you've highlighted that very well, Aejaz, that we also need to inform the purchasers of the innovations that the innovations exist and how to talk to those innovators. So I think all of us are in different stages of that within the sort of wider remit of R&D, is helping people make sure that the ideas and the end products meet. And I think the accelerator has been good for that, because obviously you just have to look at this tiny snapshot of the people involved. We're able to move information back and forth very effectively between groups of people who may never meet, and especially on the international angle of all this. We have a few minutes. Do you have any other thoughts on, thoughts or interesting stories from the accelerator about, as Aejaz said, people pivoting, how we've engaged with them? deathly silence. Well, Lindsey, I mean, you were talking before about some of the follow-up stuff. Do you think there's a chance with this program or future programs that Medipex could actually work with some of the startups beyond the program?
We really hope so, and we are having conversations with some of those startups. And my colleague Aejaz, who's on the call today, is our senior market intelligence manager, and I know there was a lot of interest from companies to work with her to sort of understand the market and understand the clinical pathways that they're trying to get into, and articulating how this product might fit. So I think there is definitely scope to move forward with a lot of the companies that we've met through the accelerator, and it's been really good from our perspective to have these opportunities to meet SMEs that we can help, and the speed mentoring sessions have been really useful in that respect.
And Ben, I think also the other angle of this, of course, is that people within academia need to talk to entrepreneurs for that mutual exchange of ideas.
Absolutely, Toby. And I think this discussion, certainly for me, has made it very clear what a tremendous opportunity the Wellbeing Accelerator has provided. And I think it'd be tragic if at the end of the tenure it finishes and we all disappear off to our own little ivory towers. So I think, it's vital that we keep a mechanism like this going, because there are so many aspects to developing a product, identifying an unmet need, as Aejaz referred to, developing the products, researching efficacy, usability, getting them to market, clinical trials, marketing, etc., all the regulatory issues. And it really, it's very hard, particularly for a small company, to be able to solve these problems individually. And we certainly can't do it. We can do aspects of it. So I think, what we're looking at the panel and wider are really the expertise that's needed to be able to do that. And if we can find some mechanism to continue to provide Wellbeing Accelerator 2, I think that would be tremendously useful.
Well, we're definitely working on that. So thank you, all of you. I think that's been a wonderful snapshot of what we've all been doing, actually. And as I say, of that breadth of R&D that startups need access to and the programs provided. So thanks to our panel. And we would all walk off the stage now, but we'll all just be unspotlighted and carry on with the next bit of the program. Thank you very much.